The stars hung cold and silent in the vast blackness of space, but beneath their distant gleam, a shadow was stirring, a shadow that would change everything. For centuries, the galaxy had thrived in uneasy peace, its many species exploring, trading, and growing. But now, an ancient menace known only as the Void Swarm was rising from the dark edges beyond known space. Rumors and whispers about it had traveled faster than any ship, a creeping fear spreading across star systems. As news reached the grand halls of interstellar councils and the homes of ordinary citizens, panic swept through the great civilizations. Worlds once proud and strong prepared to abandon their homes, their colonies, and even entire star systems, boarding fleets to flee toward the distant cores of the galaxy where safety was thought to be found. The skies buzzed with hurried ships, packed with refugees and soldiers alike, as planets emptied their population like melting ice under a harsh sun. Yet, amid this chaos of fear and flight, Earth remained stubbornly quiet. Humanity had watched, the warnings with growing concern but never panic. Commander Elena Reyes, standing on the bridge of the flagship Horizon, felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The crew bustled around her, their faces a mix of anxiety and fierce determination. She looked out through the vast window at the blue-green jewel below, their home, Earth, a fragile sanctuary teetering on the edge of something terrible. Unlike the others, humanity had chosen not to run, but to prepare. The decision was clear. When every other species fled, humans would stand and fight. Scientists and engineers had worked day and night, transforming old warships into weapons bristling with new technology, and training soldiers in tactics that were as creative as they were brutal. Elena had spent years forging her fleet into a force ready to face the unknown, knowing the cost could be their extinction. The Council of Earth had sent out warnings and calls to their scattered colonies, urging unity and readiness. But the galaxy was quiet now, strangely so, as if holding its breath. And then, the first signal came. A blinking alert, sudden and sharp, broke the tension like a crack in ice. Scouts near Epsilon Prime had encountered the swarm. Ships were lost, whole stations overwhelmed in minutes. The reports were chilling, filled with descriptions of strange creatures that moved like living shadows, overwhelming systems with relentless waves. Other species were already evacuating that region, leaving behind everything they had built. Elena's heart pounded as she called the fleet to action. The Horizon launched orders, coordinating a defense with cold precision. Soldiers prepared their weapons, engineers ran diagnostics, and pilots ran final checks. There was no time for doubt. The swarm would not wait, and if Earth was to survive, it would be on humanity's strength and will alone. As the Horizon slipped out of orbit, following the fleeing stars toward Epsilon Prime, Elena knew this was just the beginning. The universe had chosen its battleground, and humanity would stand firm on it. The silence of space was broken by the rising hum of war, and with every passing second, the question grew sharper. How long could they hold before the darkness swallowed everything? The fleet approached Epsilon Prime with heavy silence, the once thriving planet now shadowed by smoke and distant fires that painted the atmosphere in dull orange hues. Commander Elena Reyes stood on the bridge of the Horizon, eyes sharp and steady as the first scouts sent to the planet's orbit began sending urgent reports. The Void Swarm had arrived in full force, their dark shapes swarming like a plague, spreading across the land and skies in relentless waves. Elena's heart tightened as the communication crackled with messages of falling outposts, burning cities, and desperate calls for backup that no one else could answer. Every other species had abandoned this planet, fleeing into the far reaches of space. But humanity was here to hold the line. The Earth Defense Fleet quickly established a defensive perimeter, a ring of warships armed with every weapon they had managed to develop and refine in the past months. The atmosphere was tense. Every crew member knew this battle could decide the fate of more than just one world. It could be the test of humanity's will to survive. As the first ships of the swarm breached the outer defense line, Elena gave the order to engage. Explosions blossomed in the void, brilliant flashes against the darkness as energy beams tore through enemy vessels. But the swarm moved like a living force, shifting quickly, adapting to human tactics with frightening speed. They were unlike any enemy humanity had faced, neither machine nor simple life form, but something terrifyingly close to a collective mind with endless bodies. On the EC planet's surface, human soldiers fought with equal courage. Dropships landed amidst ruined cities, squads moving through twisted streets and shattered buildings, facing creatures that seemed to melt in and out of shadows. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of gunfire, punctuated by the low, eerie hum of the swarm. Yet humanity's resourcefulness shone brightest in these desperate moments. Engineers deployed new technology, energy barriers that flickered with light, and drones that struck with deadly precision. Leaders like Elena coordinated their forces like a well-oiled machine, shifting reinforcements where they were needed most. But with every victory came a cost. Ships were lost, brave souls sacrificed, and the ground beneath them cracked with the weight of battle. The sky above was a dark canvas streaked with fire and smoke, a grim reminder that this fight was far from over. Elena's thoughts raced as she tracked the movements of the enemy, searching for weaknesses. Then came a breakthrough, an unusual pattern in the swarm's attack, a moment when their assault faltered just long enough for a counterstrike. With a nod, she ordered the fleet to press harder, targeting the swarm's main clusters with concentrated fire. The resulting explosion was massive, scattering many of the enemy forces. Cheers rang out briefly on the horizon's bridge, but Elena quickly silenced them. This was no time for celebration. The swarm was wounded, but not defeated. They retreated into the planet's dense forests, deeper caves, and sprawling underground tunnels. The fight would continue, brutal and unforgiving. As night fell over Epsilon Prime, Elena stood at the viewport, watching the flickering lights of fires below and the cold stars above. The first clash had tested humanity's courage, and for now, they had survived. But the battle was only beginning. The galaxy had seen humanity stand alone while others fled, and now eyes were turning toward them. The question remained, how long could they hold, and what price would it cost before this dark storm finally passed? The silence that followed the brutal battle at Epsilon Prime was not peace but a heavy, uneasy calm that hung over the galaxy like a thick fog. As news of humanity's fierce stand against the void swarm spread, it reached the ears of scattered colonies and fleeing ships from other species that had once turned their backs on the war. Slowly, hope began to flicker where there had only been fear and despair. Commander Elena Reyes sat in the command room aboard the Horizon, watching the transmissions from distant worlds flood her screens. Messages arrived from leaders of species who had fled, their voices trembling with relief and renewed courage. These were the ones brave enough to reach out, to trust humanity's strength and offer what aid they could. Despite centuries of suspicion and competition, between species, something profound was happening. An alliance was forming in the face of annihilation. But the road to unity was anything but easy. Suspicion ran deep. Old wounds from countless conflicts made trust a fragile thread. Diplomats argued over terms, scientists debated the best way to combine their technologies, and soldiers from different worlds struggled to work side by side. Elena found herself not only leading a fleet, but also a delicate dance of politics and culture. Every decision was critical, every alliance fragile. Meanwhile, the Void Swarm had not remained idle. It learned from its defeats and adapted its tactics, launching smaller, more dangerous strikes against vulnerable colonies and supply lines. Reports of sudden attacks filled the fleet's intelligence feeds. The enemy was relentless, like a shadow that refused to disappear. Elena knew that holding their position required more than just weapons and bravery. It needed unity, something no other species had been able to achieve before. The first joint mission was planned cautiously, but with growing urgency. A small strike team composed of humans, Dralkiri engineers, and Velthar warriors prepared to infiltrate a swarm nest deep in a remote asteroid field. Their goal was to gather information that could turn the tide of war. The team's success or failure would prove whether this new alliance could truly work or fall apart under pressure. Back on the Horizon, Elena oversaw preparations, watching as representatives from each species shared their knowledge. The Dralkiri brought advanced shielding technology, The Velthar contributed powerful kinetic weapons, and humans shared their tactical experience and adaptability. Together, they formed a plan that was bold and dangerous, exactly the kind of gamble that could pay off or doom them all. As the strike team embarked on their mission, tension gripped the fleet. Each second felt stretched thin with worry and hope. Elena felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her chest. This was more than a battle. It was a test of the galaxy's future. The reports from the mission started coming in, sometimes delayed, sometimes cryptic. The team moved deeper into the heart of the swarm's territory, encountering horrors no one could have imagined. Biomechanical creatures that seemed to merge living flesh with dark metal, tunnels that twisted and changed as if alive, and strange pulses of energy that scrambled their equipment. But their courage never wavered. When they finally found the core data they sought, a powerful energy source that powered the swarm's communication, they sent the information back with a desperate burst of speed. Elena knew that with this knowledge, the fleet's scientists could develop new weapons to disrupt the swarm's coordination. The victory was small, but vital. It lit a spark across the fleet and beyond. The scattered species, watching the alliance grow stronger, began sending more ships, more supplies, and more hope. Slowly, the galaxy started to remember that it could fight together. But even as alliances formed and victories won, Elena never forgot the cost. The battlefield was unforgiving. Lives were lost every day, families torn apart, and worlds scarred beyond repair. The void swarm still loomed large, a dark cloud ready to swallow them all. Yet in the face of despair, humanity's example had become a beacon. Where others fled, they stood firm, and now they were not alone. The galaxy was beginning to rise with them. Elena looked out at the stars from her quarters, the weight of the future heavy, but her spirit unbroken. The war was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, hope had a name. It was called humanity, and the allies they had rallied to stand by their side. The long-awaited storm finally came, darkening the skies above Earth with a menace that had haunted humanity's dreams and nightmares for months. Commander Elena Reyes stood on the bridge of the flagship Horizon, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the first shapes of the Void Swarm fleet loomed like a dark wave ready to crash down. This was the siege no one wanted but everyone feared. The enemy was here in full force, and Earth, the cradle of humanity, was the battleground. The city lights below flickered as evacuation warnings blared through the streets, but millions stayed behind, unwilling to abandon their homes to shadows that had already consumed so much. Elena's voice, calm but firm, carried over the comms, rallying her fleet, and the Allied ships gathered in Earth's orbit. Ships from every corner of the galaxy now circled the planet, a fragile but fierce shield against the dark tide. As the first strike hit, the sky exploded with fire and sound. The swarm's ships moved with terrifying speed and precision, unleashing a storm of plasma and energy blasts. The defenders answered with everything they had, beams of light cutting through the chaos, explosions tearing ships apart in brilliant bursts. Below, human and allied soldiers fought desperate battles on Earth's surface. Cities had become battlegrounds, streets were scarred with craters, and buildings turned to rubble. The atmosphere was thick with smoke and fear, but also with an unbreakable resolve. Elena's command center became a nerve hub, coordinating orbital defense, ground forces, and evacuation efforts. Every moment was a battle of wits and will, as the swarm tried to break the human lines with endless waves of attackers. The battle stretched across continents, with different regions holding their ground against the relentless assaults. In one sector, a squad of Velthar warriors defended a key power station, their kinetic blades flashing as they tore through the living shadows. In another, Dralkiri engineers worked tirelessly to repair shields protecting vital cities. Elena's heart ached with every loss reported, every ship destroyed, but she knew giving in was not an option. The enemy's goal was to crush Earth's spirit, to turn it into a lifeless husk, but humanity's spirit burned brighter than ever. Then came the unexpected. The swarm began targeting communication networks and supply lines, trying to isolate Earth from its allies. Panic threatened to spread again, but Elena held firm, inspiring her forces to fight not just with weapons, but with hope. Underneath the chaos, scientists worked frantically to analyze the energy patterns of the swarm, searching for weaknesses. Elena approved every risky mission sent into the heart of the conflict, knowing that one breakthrough could change everything. It came when a young engineer discovered a unique frequency that disrupted the swarm's hive mind control. With this weapon in hand, the tide of battle shifted. Fleet commanders coordinated new attacks, targeting the core nodes of the swarm's command network. Explosions rocked the enemy lines, breaking their coordination and causing confusion among their ranks. Earth's defenders seized the moment, pushing back with fierce determination. The fight raged on for days, a relentless dance of death and survival. Elena never left her post, guiding her fleet with steady hands and a clear mind despite exhaustion. She remembered the faces of those lost and the millions depending on her, drawing strength from their courage. As the swarm's forces began to falter, unexpected reinforcements arrived. Fleets from the scattered species that had once fled now came to Earth's aid, their ships filling the skies with new firepower. Together, the Allied fleets launched a final assault on the remaining new swarm vessels, shattering their formations and forcing a retreat into the cold void. The siege was broken, but the cost was great. Earth lay battered, its skies still smoky, and its people scarred. Yet, from the ruins rose a new hope. Elena knew this battle was only one step in a longer war, but the unyielding courage of humanity and their allies had proven that even in the darkest times, they would stand and fight. The galaxy had watched Earth's last stand, and a message was clear. Humanity was not just a survivor. It was a force to be reckoned with. Defeat. Victory at Earth's siege was hard-won but fragile, and as the galaxy's forces took a moment to breathe, Commander Elena Reyes knew the true test was only just beginning. The battle must now be taken to the enemy's lair, deep within the dark reaches where the Void Swarm had first emerged, a place so alien and dangerous that few dared to venture there, yet it was the only way to end the nightmare for good. Elena's fleet gathered, a coalition of human and allied ships, their engines humming with determination as they slipped into the cold shadows beyond known space. Every face on the horizon's bridge reflected the gravity of the mission. This was a journey into the heart of darkness, where hope was a fragile thread stretched thin over endless void. Their destination was a massive, twisted structure that pulsed with dark energy, the core of the swarm's hive mind, a place alive with menace, where the lost consciousness of an ancient species was trapped, driving the swarm's relentless hunger. Elena led a small strike team chosen for their courage and skill, a mix of humans, Velthar warriors, and Dralkiri engineers, each carrying the burden of their species and the hope of survival. As they entered the asteroid field guarding the hive, the crew's nerves tightened. The void seemed alive, shadows shifting beyond the stars, and strange pulses scrambled their sensors. Communications flickered. The ship felt the presence of something vast and watching. Every system was pushed to its limits as they navigated a labyrinth of shifting tunnels carved into the dark rock, where the swarm's creatures moved like living nightmares, biomechanical horrors that blended flesh and metal, with eyes that glowed cold and hungry. Elena's team fought through ambushes, losing comrades but never retreating, each step deeper revealing more of the tragic horror behind the swarm, a species fractured and desperate, driven by fear and loss rather than mindless malice. The line between enemy and victim blurred, and Elena felt a strange sympathy, even as her resolve hardened. When they finally reached the core, the hive mind's control nexus, the air thrummed with raw energy, a vast consciousness struggling against the confines of its prison. Elena's team prepared to deploy the weapon designed to sever the swarm's connection, a delicate balance of power and precision that required every second to be perfect. But the hive fought back fiercely, unleashing waves of defenses that tore at the strike team, forcing them to hold their ground with everything they had. As explosions shook the cavern and lights flickered, Elena realized that this battle was not just physical, but a clash of wills, humanity's stubborn hope against an ancient sorrow and rage. With a final desperate push, the weapon activated, sending a pulse that rippled through the hive, fracturing the swarm's control and freeing trapped consciousnesses. The effect was immediate. The enemy's relentless assault faltered, their form breaking apart like shattered glass in the void. But the victory came with sacrifice. Several team members fell, and the structure began to collapse around them. Elena led the survivors in a frantic escape, racing through twisting tunnels as the hive disintegrated, the darkness giving way to the light of distant stars. When they finally emerged into open space, battered but alive, the galaxy felt different, quieter, freer. The heart of darkness had been pierced, and with it the nightmare of the void swarm began to fade. Elena looked at her crew, weary but unbroken, knowing that this was a turning point, not just in the war, but in the story of humanity and its allies. They had faced the deepest shadow and stood tall, proving that even in the darkest places, courage and understanding could bring light. The war was far from over, but the path ahead was clearer. And with every step forward, the galaxy moved closer to a future where fear would no longer rule the stars. The galaxy held its breath as the final battle unfolded in the shadow of a dying star, where the remnants of the void swarm, desperate and enraged, gathered for one last assault that could either mean total destruction or a new beginning for all species united by the horrors they had endured. Commander Elena Reyes, standing resolute on the bridge of the horizon, felt the weight of history on her shoulders, knowing that this moment was the climax of years of bloodshed, sacrifice, and unyielding hope. The Allied fleet, battered but determined, formed a protective ring around a small, vulnerable system that had become the rallying point for the galaxy's remaining forces. Every ship carried the scars of war, yet every pilot and soldier was ready to face the storm with unwavering courage. Elena's voice, steady and commanding, echoed through the channels as final orders were given. Defenses were raised and last prayers were whispered in 1,000 languages. The void swarm attacked with fury unmatched, their numbers seemingly endless, their dark forms twisting through space like a living shadow seeking to snuff out the light forever. Explosions erupted in waves, filling the void with brilliant flashes, and deadly silence, the clash of metal and energy, a grim symphony of war. Ground forces on the system's planets prepared for the inevitable, fortifying positions and readying themselves to fight for every inch of soil. Elena's thoughts drifted, briefly to those she had lost, comrades, friends, entire worlds, and she drew strength from their memory. As the battle raged, unexpected aid arrived from corners of the galaxy once thought lost. Ships carrying hope, supplies, and fresh warriors joining the fight with renewed vigor. It was a testament to the unity forged in fire, a shining proof that when faced with annihilation, differences could be set aside for survival and peace. The turning point came when the horizon led a daring strike deep into the heart of the swarm's command fleet. Elena coordinated with flawless precision, weaving through enemy lines, dodging deadly attacks, and delivering crippling blows to the dark hives controlling the swarm. Every moment was a test of nerves and skill, and every victory cost lives. As the enemy's control shattered, their forces fell into chaos, confusion spreading like wildfire through their ranks. On the planets below, the ground troops seized the opportunity to push back fiercely, reclaiming lost territory and driving the swarm into retreat. The final hours were a whirlwind of sacrifice and triumph, hope and sorrow intertwined as the galaxy fought to secure its future. When the last swarm vessel was destroyed and silence settled over the battlefield, it was a silence heavy with loss but also bursting with the promise of dawn. Elena stood among her allies, weary but unbroken, watching as the stars seemed to shine brighter, a new light born from the darkness. The war had ended, but the work of rebuilding had just begun. Species once divided now looked to one another, with respect and hope, forging a new alliance that would guard against the shadows for generations to come. Humanity had not only survived, it had become the beacon that guided the galaxy out of despair and into a future where the courage to stand when others fled had changed everything. Elena smiled softly, knowing that this last stand was not just an end but a beginning, a new dawn for all who called the stars home.